Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Summit, where you will learn to raise your frequency to connect more deeply with yourself, your soulmate, and the divine. I'm your host, Waxela Sananda, and today we will be talking to Leisa Peterson. But first, please join me in a short alignment process so that we can all get centered and present for this information that's going to be shared. So begin by closing your eyes and deepening your breath into your belly. And as you're breathing, bring your awareness into your heart center and the light within your heart. This is your heart light, and just feel that light glowing and growing out around your heart center. And now tune your awareness into the central sun far above your head and get in touch with the heart light of the central sun. And this is the balanced divine masculine energy in the heart of the central sunlight. And feel that energy moving down into the top of your head and moving throughout your body to the bottom of your feet and the base of your spine. And then breathe that energy into your heart center, joining with the light within you and expanding out around your chest. And now tune your awareness into the center of the earth. This is the heart of the Divine Mother and the heart light of the Mother Earth. And then feel that divine feminine energy moving up through the layers of the earth like liquid crystal plasma, moving into the bottoms of your feet and the base of your spine, all the way to the top of your head, and then down into your heart center, joining with the light from above and the light within you, creating a balanced Trinity portal of light, and expand that heart light out around your body and out to connect with every other person watching or listening right now. And then connect in also with myself and Leisa. And feel that connection supporting you, knowing that we are all on this ascension journey together, supporting each other, and we are one family of light. And now open your eyes. Thank you for doing that with me. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Leisa Peterson. I'm really excited for this conversation today. Leisa has a website called Wealth Clinic. She is a money mentor, a business coach, and an author. Welcome, Leisa.
Hi, so nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. And I'm really happy that you're willing to have this conversation today.
Yeah, I hope people can take a lot away from it.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to jump right in. The reason I invited you on this show is that you have found this, I will say, the alchemy mix of spirituality and money. And in our society, as many of us are aware, it seems like it's okay to have one or the other. If you're wealthy, you're not spiritual. If you're spiritual, you're not wealthy. And we know that's not true. So tell me how you came to create this system. And I know you bring chakras into it. I'm excited to get into that. But just for starters, how did you start this way of business?
Yeah, I came at it from two completely different angles. Just like you said, I am an unusual bird in that I'm a certified financial planner. I've worked in the money business for almost 30 years, if you include the time that I've run this company. And then I've also been on a pretty intense spiritual journey for about 20 years. And so what I did for the first 10 years was keep the two worlds separate and sort of just, like laying down the middle, no integration. And at some point that started to implode. And eventually it led me to start my company, where I realized that there was this opportunity to bring these two worlds together.
Yeah. So I love that you did that. And I think, for me, it seems like a big part of it is mindset. Would you say that, like allowing, if you're a spiritual person to start out and you're working with your business, it just seems pervasive to me that there's this idea, this lack consciousness, I guess, that will keep a lot of people from being able to make a lot of money in their businesses. Do you find a
Yes.
lot of that going on, the lack
Yeah.
consciousness and
Totally. I mean, what I attribute it to, and I try as much as possible to use different language, because we can get like, oh, I've heard that before. And with money, everything seems to have been discussed before. But what I've noticed is it's not even poverty or lack thinking so much as it is just simply fear of survival. Like, we are human beings in this human body, and we are here to make sure that we stay alive. And even though we've evolved over all these, tens of thousands of years, we still have this part of ourselves that's all about survival, and fear being the thing that keeps us alive. At least that's what we think. And so money plays into that, because what happens is money provokes a lot of people's fears. And so I focus on how can we alleviate these fears. Some of them are very justified and some of them aren't. But what happens after a while is we just start making very limited based thinking. We start thinking small rather than, abundantly and prosperously, because we're so programmed by that fear that we just don't know how to get out.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And for instance, I had a client the other day who came in, who had had a big awakening experience and quit his job, and he had a well-paying job, and it just, he wanted to pursue spirituality and change his life, which is great. If you're in a job that's not working for you and you have a spiritual awakening, it's just not going to fit anymore. But he was kind of trying to figure out, well, what's next for me, what. And so how do you coach someone that's in that process of, so many people are waking up and realizing, oh, my 9 to 5 just isn't it for me. What should I do with my life? How can I be more spiritual and make money? What is your coaching for someone in that situation?
Yeah, I see people in so many different situations, so I'm kind of trying my best to think about how to answer this question. Uh, no question about it, people often are looking for, how can I bring more of my passion? How can I bring more of my why? Or how can I even figure out what my why is? Like, why am I here? And then how do I translate that into a business? And I would say that's a big part of what people end up coming to me around. And originally I thought, well, it's money. But then I realized business is how we get the money. And so a lot of times people end up exploring and actually growing and awakening through the starting of a business and the figuring out of like why I'm here. And maybe we enter our businesses with one idea, very simplistic idea, and then when we get into it, we start to realize, oh, there's these deeper themes going on about why I'm here and what I'm really here to do. And so just that process alone, whether you make money or you don't, is hugely transformational for most people. And I would say the more you struggle with it, probably the more you learn about yourself as you try to go through the process of getting a business up and running.
Yeah, or even for some people staying in the business that they're in. Not everybody wants to run their own business.
No.
Um, but there are ways to bring more passion and purpose into what you're already doing. Is that kind of what you did, because you were already in the world of finances and spirituality, and somehow you merged the two?
Yeah, I think that I had no intention whatsoever of ever making money from my spiritual journey. That was not interesting to me, because I think that early on, there was a sense of this separation of like, you know, money, this is business, and then this is your spiritual awakening, kind of like going to church. And it just, the idea of making money on that area was perplexing to me. And it cracks me up now that that's a lot of what I do. And that's what people, like, people come to me for business, and they come to me for money stuff. But when they walk away, that's not what they talk about that I've helped them with. And I think it does echo my own journey, which was, I didn't enter into spirituality because I wanted to make money. I entered into my spiritual journey because I wanted to find a cessation to the intense suffering that I was experiencing in my life. And when I started to come out of it, I started to notice that because I had gone so deep into my process, and I thankfully had no one paying attention. I mean, I was teaching people how to meditate, and I was doing some stuff very, as part of a spiritual organization that I was teaching as part of. But like, my own inner journey was my own inner journey, and I didn't have to share it with anybody for many, many years. And I think that that also helped, because I think it's funny because it's hard, you know, we never know how it all came together exactly. But I think I just got to the point where I could no longer keep them separate. And I had reached a place where I had a feeling it would be helpful for others to see, you know, what they could learn from me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it was almost like a natural joining of your passions or of your spiritual life with what you were already doing and already good at.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that you have a chakra and money quiz on your website. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So a few years into helping folks with business and money, I kept having the chakras come up over and over again. And I had studied them many years ago, but because my past was more Buddhist oriented, there are chakras in Buddhism, but they explore it a little bit differently. It's all about the inner winds. And so when I started just kind of being here in Sedona, I think had a big activation of it, where all of a sudden it's like, I'm really interested in this. I need to understand it more. And the deeper I went, I realized that I had been meditating on the chakras, but in this other kind of way. And so it's kind of like coming home to something that you know deeply, but then you had no mental understanding of. So when I got the mental understanding of it through meditation, and I started channeling it into the work that I do, all of a sudden, like, huge things happened. And namely, I created a series of meditations and a couple workshops, and I put them out into the world. They were done live. And about a few weeks, I think, after I started this, I started getting calls and inquiries and emails from people saying, what you've created is literally changing my life. Like, everything is different. And I was like, you know, kind of leaning forward, like, what I do, you know, I've created a lot of meditations. What's different about this? And so that's why I kind of call this a co-creation, because people were literally giving me feedback and like, can you create more of this? Can you do more of this? Can you help me with this? And I leaned into it and started creating a series of meditations and teachings around how to use the chakras and the rebalancing and the cleansing and the kind of embodiment of what they represent to explain a map of our relationship with money. And so it just sort of created over time to now what it is the foundation of a book that I've got coming out in June called The Mindful Millionaire. But it teaches people how each of the chakras actually has a relationship to that fear that we were talking about, and translates to our relationship and our experiences, practically speaking, with money. So it's kind of a complete merge of all of my financial planning and all my financial background with the spiritual into one framework.
Interesting. Well, okay, so I did get on there and I took the quiz, and at the end it says, you know, I don't know if everyone gets you're unbalanced in something.
Yeah, everyone gets at least one of 7.
Okay,
What
yeah,
was
I
it?
got unbalanced in my throat chakra. And I
Oh,
thought that was really interesting because, well, for one thing, I just recently did this. It was a what do you call it? QHHT, or a quantum healing hypnosis technique, where I went to a practitioner and I had a blockage in my throat, which we worked on, like getting out. And then, and I'm hosting a summit. So I'm,
yes,
I'm on
yes.
here every day, doing interviews, and I'm putting Facebook lives out there and Instagram, video. And I'm like, wow, what do I need to do for my throat? So tell me about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the throat is all around about trust. So trust, we think, oh, it's about trusting other people, but at its root, it's about trusting ourselves at the deepest kind of way of being, and then how that translates into our experiences with money. So sometimes it can be trust in the people that we hire to help us manage our money. Sometimes it can be trust back to ourselves. Like, we don't take the risks that we need to take because we don't trust that we have enough knowledge, for example, which also ties into kind of the brow chakra. So some of these, the survey doesn't have like half throat, half brow chakra, like it's not that complicated. But what can happen is I always look around to see what's also by the ones that get activated that come through in the quiz. It's like the heart and the brow. So intuition and the heart, like what might those have to do with it? But I use it really to help people sort of think differently about their experiences with money. And that's one example.
Interesting. Well, I know for me, my organization around my money and consistency in doing the stuff I need to do, like bookwork's the last thing I ever want to do. Taxes, it's always the last day after an extension, So it's not, it's like, I'm very resistant in that area to like doing those things. So if that's throat chakra, then that makes sense.
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily the action in this case, but it might be the story behind why there's procrastination. And
Mm,
that is oriented to trust.
okay. Yeah.
So it's like sometimes we have to peel back the layers in order to see like what it is. And it's so fun because unfortunately there is so much fear about money. We do exactly what you said. Like what you described is super normal. This is what a lot of people do. We just it's not very interesting. It brings up fear. So like that, like why do we want to focus on it? Whereas when we bring spirituality into it, we can make it a little more fun. It's kind of like, now I'm going on a scouting mission. Now I'm going to figure out what's really going on. And we turn it into our spiritual path journey.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I definitely need to integrate some spirituality into my bookwork, I think. Yes, I like that. So another thing I know that you talk about is helping people find their true value and their self-worth, and how that translates into your, I guess, money matrix, or your financial world. Can you speak
Mhm.
about that?
Yeah. So the whole book is about the journey to finding your true self. And the pathway to do that is around how you feel about yourself, period.
Mm.
And I think that it's a really simple statement. How do you feel about yourself? But what I've discovered is it's actually really complicated how we feel about ourselves. And again, back to the chakras, the sacral chakra is such a robust chakra because it's about creativity and birthing, right? Because this is where women hold the babies, and it's this place that I have found has a sense of deep worthiness around our ability to be a creative being in this life. And so what I've found is many people don't there's a superficial understanding of self-worth, and then there's a very deep rooted, grounded understanding of like, I am worth this. It starts in the root chakra and it works its way up. But what I do is I show people a pathway to unlock the areas of their lives where they really don't feel worthy about things. And I do use a lot of inner child work and a lot of storytelling and helping people rewrite their story. And so the book that I wrote is taking people through these different steps to understand where things got out of whack and why they don't believe in their true value. Another big part of that process is awakening feeling sense that most people don't even understand what it is. And so I truly believe my purpose in this life is about teaching people how to change how they feel about themselves. So I use chakra and money to do that one purpose.
Wow. Yeah, that's really what it is all about, because it starts with self-acceptance and self-love, and then everything branches out from there. Um, so how do you do that? I know, you do coaching. You said you wrote a book about it. Can you like give us a simplified understanding of how you get people to balance, their value and open that up?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of tuning in to the audience and kind of what is most helpful to share. The first thing that comes to mind is we are each living in any given moment in our own respective paradigm. This is the collection of all the beliefs and all the feelings and all the things that have gone on in the past. The challenge is that we cannot see most of the time outside of that paradigm. It's almost impossible until you actually devote your business and your life to it, which is what I've done. So I am a really good spotter of paradigms. I quickly can identify the fear-based paradigm that someone is living in. And because I can see it so clearly within minutes, I can't see it if somebody doesn't want me to see it. Sometimes I have to say that because people are like, it's not like being psychic, like I look around with these like x-ray goggles, but if someone wants me to see what paradigm they're sitting in, and why it's not working for them anymore, then I literally can identify that and start to see the paradigm at the same time that they want to be in, that they're ready to move into. And then it becomes really simple because from my perspective, because I've done it thousands of times, it's like literally looking at where they want to go and looking at where they are, what needs to be dropped away in their ego identification in order to move into that new paradigm. Most of the time it's dropping away. It's not adding anything to their experiences or their knowledge. It has nothing to do with head knowledge. The only reason head knowledge helps is sometimes people have to understand where they're at, from a mind standpoint, to be able to lean in to do the work. But that's literally what I do. I spot the paradigm they're in and I help them get where they want to go quickly.
Interesting. So when you say you're tuning in, or like you're kind of reading the audience or tuning into your client, what are you doing there? Are you communicating? Do you have a guide? Is it your higher self? What are you actually doing in that process?
I don't use the term guides, although I know that they're super helpful to other people. I am so in touch with my feeling sense that I can, sometimes it's used like the psychic terms, clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyant. I am a visual and hearing, so clairsentient. I also feel senses in my body, but basically when people start to tell me where they are and I need to hear it from their voice, I can also read what they write in their journaling. I have basically like a tuning fork that will notify me of what exactly it is and what area of their life needs to be explored, where sort of the fear is the most intense in their life and how it's controlling them. So I also, when I'm working direct with people, because a lot of times I will read journaled things and I'll tune in from that. But when I'm working, through Zoom or face to face, I'm literally, it's like I see pictures when I'm helping them in the healing stage. I hear it's clairsentience, so it's my body lights up when I'm searching what it is. So it's almost like it changes depending on what phase we are in the process, because it's not just being able to see it. I think a lot of people can see the problems. I think where I'm different is that not only do I see it, I can actually take somebody through the healing process in a very short amount of time. And those different skills that I have kick in at each of those stages. Never tried to describe it before, but
Well, I love that because, and it makes sense. And, the people watching this are open-minded to all of these things. And we talk a lot about, as you open up to embody the higher frequencies, you're raising your vibration, you're embodying more light or more energy. Your body becomes multisensory. And after 20 years of meditation or 30 or however many you did, I'm sure that you were opening and you started to get in touch with those gifts. And, they're really things that we can all open up to. And then it's, in the beginning, I think it's faith and just believing, okay, I'm hearing this and I'm experiencing this and I'm seeing this when I talk to this person. And I find that the voice holds so much information. I work with a voice technology too that measures 1.2 billion bits of information in the voice. That's how much information our voice has, because it's like the energy of all of us. So you're picking up that feedback through the voice frequencies and then processing it through your body in with these tools that you've opened up, and it's almost like you're getting a computer readout of here's what is going on for this person.
yeah. The thing that I didn't mention, which I think is the most important part, I have always had the gifts that I described, but the difference is they were pretty much useless I would predict, I knew things like when I was 7, I had a premonition of 9/11, and I pretty much knew it was going to happen. And I didn't know when, I didn't know anything, but I knew that it was true. And then I ended up having a meeting in the World Trade Center on 9/11. And I lived in San Francisco at the time. And the 48-hour before it happened, I literally couldn't sleep. And I was distraught. It was horrible. And when it started to happen, my meeting got canceled at the last minute. And I wasn't there, but my husband called me thinking I was in the building. And I knew, that it went all the way back to when I was a kid. And that's just one of many things that I've known, but I couldn't explain. So the difference between having these gifts that we're born with and what's happened in this lifetime for me, I think is interesting for the audience to understand. And that is, I was raised with so much trauma and so much difficulty. Not that I was raped or anything like that, but like just intense emotional experience at home with parents who fought a lot and were very, very emotionally also psychic and had not had a good environment that they were raised in. And then money, stress, and all of that. But what happened was 20 years ago, my dad was brutally murdered, and I began the disillusion of my identification with the person that I thought I was. And so over this 20-year period, everything has dropped away. Like, I literally am not just able to imagine what it's like to be peaceful, but if I want to create peace in any given moment, I have that ability to the point where there's nothing, I'm not attached to any parts of myself. I'm free to be who I want to be in any given moment. Now, it doesn't mean I don't suffer, but the point that's important for people to understand is when I work with people, there is nothing here but service. So it became, my gifts became hyperactive, I guess, when there was no longer any suffering inside of myself. So when I work with other people, there are no stories whatsoever about what's going to happen. And in the beginning, I was like you said, like I started hearing the voices larger and more, I was more conscious to them, but I had no idea if they actually were true or resonating for the people that I was trying to help. But as the universe, gives what we need, people just started showing up. And I trusted myself enough to say, I think this is what's happening. And it was so uncanny and so on target and happened over and over and over for years that eventually, you're just like, okay, nothing is questioned. I just trust that what comes through when I'm in service is perfectly divine. Even if somebody doesn't want to hear it, I can still hold space for that and know that they're supposed to hear it, even if they don't want to hear it in that moment, because it wouldn't come through if it wasn't true. And true, when I say that, true in that moment for that person. Many times people are not ready to hear certain information. And so that's also really important. My mind can see things and be like, oh, they just need to do da, da, da. And it's like, absolutely not. That is not going to be helpful for them. That's where the intuitive gifts literally run the whole thing and have nothing to do with my mind. It's fascinating to me.
Wow. Interesting. So you had premonitions as a child, and I'm sorry for your loss of your father. That I'm sure that was a massive trauma. And so what was it that had you able to clear that trauma from from yourself? Because that's, you said yourself, that was a massive trauma, and you had to get that out of the way so that you could be a clear slate to receive from other people.
Yeah. Meditation for 20 years, no question about it. About 8 years, well, 6 years into the process of beginning to meditate, I was now teaching meditation. This is going back 2005. My mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. And my grandmother was dying, and I was caring for her. And in the process of kind of experiencing death at that level of the two other closest people, beyond my kids and my husband, were passing away at very early for my mom in her 50s. That caused me, I think it awakened inside of me this desire to look inside of forgiveness. And I think the biggest thing was helping my mom die and see her suffer in this such intense way. I mean, she wanted to stay alive for my kids. I literally was giving birth to my son a few months after she got diagnosed. And she was like, I'm just going to stay alive as long as I possibly can so I can have this relationship with him. Well, what that meant was her mind kept her alive, but she had like 8 or 9 surgeries in a 3.5-year period. I mean, doctors would normally never give somebody a surgery, but she was like, I can do it. I can, keep going. And that intensity forced me to not only look at her and my relationship with her and all the problems that had been, left over from childhood, but also look at my dad, who was now deceased. And I went on a long retreat, like 3 months in my closet, where I was still a mom. I still had a job, but I did as little work as possible as a mortgage banker at the time. I locked myself in the closet. My son was 1 year old, and I literally counted mantras for like 14 hours a day. And it was a special Buddhist retreat that was sort of being designated. Normally you don't do it in your closet. You do it at a Buddhist retreat center or something. And in the course of that 3-month period, it was like, I think of the Buddha and I think of those images of like the devil, kind of the devilish sort of spirits that haunt him and all of that. Like all of that happened for me. And I'd love to say I came out of the retreat and I was like awakened, but it wasn't like that. It was like I just did enough to clear out so that I could help my mom die with so much so much love and compassion between us rather than what we had before.
Hmm.
So that was one example, but there have probably been like 8 of those. So I'm a different like some people awaken, like Eckhart Tolle talks about awakening, you know, like that. I'm like, I wasn't one of those. Like, it's been happening where parts of the ego drop away, and then I get used to this new normal, and then I enter another phase of like tragedy and difficulty and problems, and then another big chunk drops away. So that's been my story.
Wow. Yeah, that is an intense path. I also have had a slow, gradual over 30 years opening, not the one big boom, but it is layers. It's like I always say, layers of an onion, where one peels back and you're at a new, for most people, as the ascension process, the process of raising your frequency, is a little at a time. And there are some times where it's a big pop. And for some people, they aren't even trying and they get a great big download and they're like, what do I do with this? I hear more and
Yes.
more of those stories all the time. But it's also interesting how, like, the divine or the universe or God or whatever you want to call it puts us in a situation where we get exactly what we need, even though you had to deal with these horrible traumas of losing your father and your mother and your grandmother and all at once. And yet it was the thing that had you do such intense work that you got the clearing that you needed so that you could go out and be of service in the world
Totally.
in your own unique way. um, I think that is such a key for people to realize, like, all these horrible things happen, and it's who are you being in the process? And that doesn't mean don't deal with your trauma, because you have to deal with it to get there. But, like, it's on some higher level, you chose that for yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I don't look at any of the things that have happened to me as being bad from my own side. They were bad in the world and the practical experiences. Of course, they were horrible, but like, I look at how I've responded to those situations, and that there's nothing bad. There's only goodness and love. And I think of the person that I was 20 years ago, and I'm like, God bless her heart, because she was a mess and she was so unhappy, and she thought that life had passed her by and there was no chance of ever changing that. And so here I sit today, and it's like the love that I feel for the world and people and the human condition is so mind-blowing how big it is, because I coped with it through indifference when I was growing up. Like, I just shut it all down and ignored it. So here I am now in my full state of being a feeler, and it's not always pleasant. It's like, it's hard to feel everything. It's hard to feel what people are experiencing, outside of yourself, and to know things about them that they don't even know about themselves. And yet I wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, this is as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is the life, to be able to feel like you understand it, and you know how to be of service, and you know that as long as I stay on this planet, that I can be creating more good than bad.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for doing that work. And so I want to kind of bring it back around to the money piece. Um, Practically, like, what can we offer? What can you offer to the viewers today to help them get their money, their world of money and spirituality aligned and balanced? What are, like, even just a few practical tips that people could start looking at and working with in their financial lives?
Mm-hmm. So, I look at it as stages. I think that it's really important that we start at the foundation and we work our way up. And what I mean by that is making sure that what is happening in our lives today, that we have enough money coming in on a monthly basis to more than cover our expenses. And if we don't, and, you know, again, I work with a lot of business owners, and business owners can sometimes be the most broke people out there, where they just don't make enough money, or it's inconsistent. So, you know, I always like to make sure that people have a really good sense of like, I make more money than what I bring in. I make more money than what I have go out every month. And I'm able to, you know, ultimately save, and I'm ultimately able to pay off my debt. But you can't easily pay off debt when you don't have that equation. So it's like, start with what matters first, which is figuring out how to manage the expenses and make sure that your income is greater than that, you know, and the more you do that, the more you're going to have success, because the other stuff gets easy. It's simple, but yet a lot of us don't actually think about the importance of that one thing that can change our lives. And I've seen people go from not saving any money to all of a sudden saving 50% of their income, just by being more conscious of the inner work, doing the inner work to say, why don't I save? What is inside of me that keeps me from saving? Let's look there. You know, there are behaviors we're doing over and over again. And I'm here to tell you that there's most likely a pattern underneath that behavior. And once you get to the root of the pattern, there's a good chance you can change it. But if you don't understand the pattern, it's really hard to change something that you've been doing one way for years and years, because the likelihood is you'll continue to do the same thing.
Yes, good point. For me, I find mindset so important, especially, you know, if you are stepping into a new business or a new aspect of business or taking on new responsibility. You've got to work with the mindset so that you're able to hold a new level of success if you've consistently not been able to hold that in the past.
We don't talk about mindset so much because I have seen a lot of people who have great mindsets and they are not changing their money behaviors. It's very interesting. It's not always the same, is what I would say. Your behaviors may have a very different story. So we've got a lot of we live in times where there's universally a ton of great information and great books available to us. And we can train our minds to like think all the right stuff. But the action of like what we change is not, it's like, I see plenty of situations where people have great mindsets, but they're not doing the behavior differently. You see that?
Yeah, so it's like failing to bring, like they might know what they need to do, but they're failing to do what they need to do.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, that's the disconnect of that would be not embodying the thing that you need to, the frequency or the thing that you need to do.
Yeah.
You know,
and a lot of people, I mean, it's not just about the making of money. There are a lot of people out there, celebrities, you know, included, that make a lot of money and spend all of it and don't save any of it. And it's a chronic problem in our society. And my point is that there's patterns underneath that when we uncover them, we can change that behavior and have it not be painful. Because I think there's an idea that it's going to be painful. I mean, I have to go on a diet, you know, budget or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work that way. It's different than that. Yeah. When you get to the pattern and you eradicate the pattern, then the behavior will change most of the time, just naturally, without even feeling like you are being restricted.
Yeah, that speaks into, you know, everything, every disease is they've scientifically proven this, that there's a pattern holding, you know, a pattern for every disease. And even if, and they did these tests where even if the person hasn't developed the disease yet, they did this for women in ovarian cancer. So if a woman has the pattern, she will eventually get the disease. And they were able to test it over time. So if the pattern was there, but the disease wasn't, over time, it would show up. But if you can come in and disrupt the pattern and have it, you know, come apart and then bring a coherence to that pattern and replace it with coherent energy, the disease won't happen. It's true for every disease. And so it's also true, it's what you're saying for, for self-worth, for self-value, for being able to financially hold your money, because if there's a pattern in place that's going to have you spend everything that comes in and more, that's got to change if you're ever going to save or pay off debt.
Yeah. And it also happens on the opposite side of what we were talking about, where some people are really good with managing their money. They've got plenty of money, but yet they haven't done any of the mindset work, or they haven't really looked inside. So this is happening because of willpower, and because they're so fear-based that they're like, I'm just going to work really hard. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make a lot of money and save it. But the pattern underneath that, and this is what I found in my research and working with people, is that I have two audiences that I work with. One has plenty of money, but the problem underneath it is still the fear of not having it, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not being all that they want to be. And it's actually the same fear that we deal with self-sabotage, or even just financial struggle in general, where you can't get out of a pattern of, under earning or something like that. But they look very differently, but then they end up coming to meet at the same root cause.
So even if it's whether it's poverty or someone who's got money but still in lack or fear around losing it, it's the same pattern.
It's the same.
Interesting. Yeah, and that makes sense. And then again, it comes back to value, self-worth too. I think that's always at the core of so deeply of money and success, and what you can hold and
well, yeah. Plus, when you have great self-worth and you've dealt with your security and survival issues, just to be clear, you really don't need very much. You're incredibly happy with very little. And that's why you'll see a lot of people just sort of live these very simple lives, because they're just not caught up in the paradigm of thinking that you need all this stuff to be happy anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And they don't need to show off either.
No, but that's one of the ones that comes up a lot, and can be used really as a very manipulative tool to get us to buy stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have that need to be seen, or, even lack of self-worth, I'm sure we're bombarded with, well, buy this, buy that, try this, go do that, get this car, get that house, and it's never ending in our society. I'm sure you could go on buying things forever. They don't run out of things to advertise to us that could make our lives better. Right. But if you get to that core, you don't need that stuff.
Well, even if we think of creating a business, if you have two people and one person is creating the business because they do want to be famous, they do want to fill the hole that they feel inside of themselves, and they get out there and they do all these things, and there's a lot of fear associated with building that business. In comparison to that would be, you're creating a business because you've reached a place where whether you make money or not isn't the true goal. The goal is, how can I spread these ideas, and how can I be in service of other people? What does that look like? Hopefully I can, pay for my business and pay for my lifestyle or whatever at a very basic level. But the business that gets created from that place is going to look very, very different than this one, even if they're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And so with that, be careful who you partner with, right? Because you're taking on their vision and their energy in your business. True. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that can be an issue for a lot of people. This is really interesting. I'm enjoying all of this conversation. Is there something you'd like to share that I wouldn't know to ask you, or it could be in the form of a life hack, or some bit of knowledge that that you would like everyone to know?
I think what's coming up is really that you are your own best guide, that you are the person that will always be there, and that you want to do everything in your power to whatever books you read, whatever teachers you follow, that remind yourself again and again that you are the guide and no one else is. They may give you great teachings, they may help you enormously, but at the end of the day, it's all going to fall back to you. And so be sure that whoever you follow and what you read is encouraging you along that direction, because unfortunately, in the world that we live in, when we gain these powers that we've been talking about in this conversation, we do become very powerful people. And there was a realization on my behalf maybe 10 years ago where I was like, holy cow, like I have become a very powerful person. And I could see how some people gain these abilities we've been talking about, and they do not have the ultimate other person in mind. Fascinating to me. Just because we wake up doesn't mean that happens. And so we may have fabulous teachers, but we are the ones who need to be making sure that we're paying attention to our own understanding of ourselves alongside of those other teachings. And that will position us perfectly so that whatever happens, we're able to respond to it and to not have to react to situations along, our spiritual journey. It can be a very organic and natural process when we're the one that we're trusting more than anyone else.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. That is so important. And, it's always kind of, I don't know, in an ugly way, fascinating to me. Like, how can a person be so spiritually activated or so wealthy and so lacking in, service and consciousness of the world, which is ultimately what's going to make them happy. And I think it must just be a disconnect from the heart, because when you drop into your heart and that's activated, it only feels good to be of service in the world.
Totally. It's true. And in my own journey, I can say, there's a lot of darkness in life, and we do our best to overcome the darkness, but some people, they might not have been able to eradicate all of it. And so all it takes is, a strong kind of area of our lives that we are not fully in integrity with. And it spoils. It's kind of like if you have blueberries and one of them, becomes moldy, they sort of make the other blueberries moldy. It's like, it does affect the other stuff. It's not the other blueberries' fault, but it happens. And so
Right.
I just think that I'm a realist in the fact that it's not anyone's fault. They don't know what they're doing. They just can't help it because there is still areas that they're working on. But for us on the other side, the point is that it can be very difficult to discern who's in integrity and who's not nowadays, period.
It can be. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So that's where, unless we're relying on ourselves, then because if we trust ourselves more than anyone else, this is what happens is we abdicate in our spiritual journey. We abdicate responsibility to others without even meaning to, without realizing it. But we return home to ourselves. And if we can know that that's part of our journey, it makes things more, I think, enjoyable. And it's just amazing when I wish more people would say this, because I think we'd spend a little more time like, is this reinforcing not the big ego, we're not trying to reinforce the small ego inside of ourselves. What we're trying to do is notice the difference between the true self, this kind of higher consciousness, and the human condition, which often has a lot of flaws associated with it.
Yeah. The imbalances, I guess, like you can think of that rotten blueberries, an imbalance that someone hasn't like brought back. And also, before we go any farther, I do want to say, like, for people that do have money and they're enjoying a nice house and a nice car and all that, no judgment. I think, if it brings you joy and it makes you happy and it's part of your enjoyment and expression and you can afford it, then by all means do what makes you happy. It's when you try and take those things and create happiness through having that it gets confusing for people. Uh,
Totally. I mean, we're multimillionaires. We have many different properties. We have stuff. Like, there is not a place of any judgment about any of that. In fact, the reason I feel very strongly that the money has come into our lives so that I would be free to be able to create this business and share what we share. No question about it. That was my purpose. I needed that strong foundation in order to not have to worry about where the money was coming from.
Yeah, beautiful. And then you're able to share that with others from a place of balance
Hmm.
and clarity. So that's really beautiful. We are at the end of our hour now. So I just want to finish by saying thank you so much for your time and your energy. I've really enjoyed the conversation and just kind of getting into the world of the consciousness around money. And your website is wealthclinic.com, correct?
Yes.
And so for everybody that's watching, please respond to today's email. Let me know something that was a great takeaway for you. Maybe you learned something about money or balance or whatever it was, anything from the conversation with Leisa today, let me know. And then I will share your responses and feedback with Leisa. And with that, that is the end. Again, I'm going to say thank you so much, Leisa. I appreciate you so much. And it was really enjoyable to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
my pleasure. And everybody else, namaste.